Hi, I'm Lucilla Ronai and welcome to another museum from home. Today I really want to talk to you about the Admiral Paris collection held at the Australian National Maritime Museum because we're currently preparing it for exhibition in the Under Southern Skies exhibition. So it's a really interesting collection, so let me tell you a little bit about Admiral Paris first. So Admiral Paris was a French Navy captain who circumnavigated the world 3 times in the early 1800s, and during that time he made lots of drawings and watercolours and observations of non-European vessels, what he called indigenous watercrafts. Then after this time, these drawings and watercolours were compiled to create a series of engravings and lithographs with accompanying text about them. So the accompanying text pages describe and define what you're seeing in the engravings and lithographs. So the lithographs in this collection are depicting watercrafts in use. Then there are a series of engravings, and these are more technical plans of the watercrafts. So there's quite a lot of these. There's 288 pages in total, and they date from the early 1800s and they're in varying condition. I do pH testing, and this means I am checking the acidity levels of the paper. There's the pH scale, which goes from 0 to 14. 7 at the middle is neutral, 0 is the most acidic, and 14 is the most alkaline or basic. So when I did the pH test of these papers, most of them were at a pH around 4.5, which is quite acidic. When we see paper getting this acidic, we see not just chemical changes, but also physical changes. So the paper was really brittle. It was starting to actually break up and tear. And this wasn't just because people were actually ripping the paper, it was just because the fibers were so weak. Some of them were incredibly discolored, but they also had different levels of discoloration. When I looked closer, there was a bit of a smell to them, and it looked like there was maybe either water damage or an historic treatment that might have gone wrong and over time not served them well. So the aim for the treatment was to get them ready for exhibition and also to improve their condition so they'd last. This meant improving their physical condition, but also their chemical condition. So the engravings and lithographs got washed, and the purpose of washing is to remove a lot of acidic degradation, and it also helps remove some of the discoloration as a fortunate byproduct of that process. And then I wanted to also use the washing to raise the pH by what we call buffer washing. Before we do any of this kind of stuff, we have to make sure that it's safe to do by doing testing, because sometimes, even though it's the same object that's been made the same way at the same time and it's been subjected to the same history, they might react differently for whatever reason. So I tested the solubility of all the media involved. So I tested the lithographic inks, and they were not soluble in water and they were not soluble in ethanol either. So they were completely safe to wash in whatever way I wanted. But when it came to the engravings, they weren't soluble in water or ethanol, but they did seem to lift, the media seemed to lift with pressure. So I had to be really careful with the washing method that I used to make sure that I didn't shift any of the media. So there's lots of different types of washing that conservators can do, and we have to choose specifically the style that's appropriate for the object and the vulnerability of the media. I did what we call an immersion wash with a support for the lithographs, and it was incredible. They were in essentially a bath. Think about it like washing your paper items, but seriously, don't try this at home. They were sitting in the water for quite a long time, and you could literally see the yellow discoloration, which means the acidic degradation coming out in the wash water. So I have some images of the beakers filled with the water that came out of the baths, and it's incredible the discoloration that was removed. I did multiple washes with deionized water, which means all the ions have been taken out, and it's a very purified version of the water to make sure that I was getting out as much discoloration and degradation that I could. And then the final wash that I did for the lithographs is the buffer wash. So there's a few different things we can put in our baths to buffer the pH higher than 7. So in this case, I decided to do a calcium bicarbonate. And after we did the buffer wash, it was then time to dry the works because we don't want them to stay wet. If you allow paper items to air dry, they'll often get what we call cockling and they won't dry flat. The paper will be all a bit wobbly. So we often dry under presses. So I lay it up rime, which is a non-woven polyester material that nothing really sticks to and it won't affect the media. Then I had blotter paper, this really thick, beautiful blotter paper that sucks up moisture. Then I layered that with felts and then I weighted it. And it was very important to make sure it was under press for a really long time so all the moisture is drawn out and it's pretty much bone dry. I maybe shouldn't call it bone dry though, it's paper. Doesn't matter. That was the process we used for the lithographic prints. So much discoloration was brought out from it and it is in such better condition. I tested the pH, it's now at a pH of about 8, which is perfect. There were some tears around the edges, historic tears, so after washing I made sure I repaired them with, you guessed it, Japanese tissue paper and wheat starch paste. The idea is with tears is that we want to realign them as close as possible to the original tear line, and we want to make sure the paper stays flat. We also try and make sure they're not obtrusive, so when we do tear repairs we try and make sure we do them on the back of items if there is a front and a back. Also we try and make them of a really thin Japanese tissue so they pretty much disappear. I could talk to you about Japanese tissue paper forever. Paper conservators and Japanese tissue, oh my gosh, seriously, it's a thing of beauty. I attached Japanese tissue paper hinges to the top and use that to put it in a window mount. So window mount has a backing board that the object's attached to with those hinges. You can still lift the paper item up to see on the other side, and then it has a window cut out so you can see the image area or the area of the work that we do want to see. So now I want to talk to you about the engravings. I used a suction table, it sucks the air down, and when it turns on it goes. So we put the engraving on the suction table with the media side facing up. The discoloration literally jumped out of it. You can see how much discoloration kept coming out. So obviously these works were crying out for a wash. So it was a very successful treatment. Feeling the paper from when I first started out just looking at the condition to after I'd treated them, it felt so much stronger. They were no longer brittle. They no longer felt like they were going to start falling apart. Washing treatments can be incredibly beneficial if they're done right. So then when it came to the text pages, the yellow folios, we decided not to do a wash. Instead, I just made sure I did localized humidification and flattening because a lot of the edges where it was torn were all folded up inside each other. So I wanted to flatten it out, reunite all the tears back together, and where there were losses, holes, bits missing, we decided to infill them. So we always try and repair tears because there's a risk that once they start, they'll get bigger. And once they get bigger, whole bits of paper can become separated from the whole. And if they're separated, there's a risk that you'll lose them and they'll disappear. So I guess when conservators work really well, like our best work is when you don't see our work at all. We essentially do invisible work. And that's the sign of a good conservation treatment. So sometimes it can seem like the treatments we do are a bit magical. You just see a before and after photo. You don't see all the time and the treatment that goes in, all the testing and the examination in between. So sometimes it can just seem like our treatments are magic. Boom, it's done. Boom, next step. Boom, it's instantaneous. And so I really like showing you time lapses, so you're not just seeing a magical before and after photo, you're also seeing the process that goes through. So I have a time lapse of doing the infills. So the reason why we do color matching is to try and drop back areas that are missing. Your eye's not going to get drawn to the hole at the bottom. Instead, you're going to be able to read the text on the yellow folio. I used watercolors to tone the tissue paper to the right tone. It took me quite a few hours to get it perfectly matched, and I've got some swatches that show you all the iterations I went through. Yellow is not an easy color. I also tried to match the thickness of the losses with the thickness of the repairs, but if you look closely you can see. Also, because it's Japanese tissue paper and wheat starch paste, they are reversible, so if someone in the future decides to remove them, they can. So the treatment of these 288 items is going to take quite a long time, so it's going to be a gradual major treatment process that I'm going to do hopefully over the next few months. So the Maritime Museum has one version of the Admiral Paris collection, but there are others in collections around the world. So our collection is online, so you can check it out at the Maritime Museum website, and it's also on the Australian National Maritime Museum Google Arts and Culture page, so you should definitely check that out. So I hope you enjoyed some insight into the treatment I did for the first 5 items that are going on display in the Under Southern Skies exhibition from the Admiral Paris collection. Thank you for joining me for another museum at home.